Welcome to DevEx Unpacked. I'm Alan Carson, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Cloudsmith. We're solving the challenges of artifact management and are on the path to becoming the software supply chain itself. In this weekly podcast, we share knowledge from Cloudsmith employees, customers, and other great guests from the software industry. Along the way, we'll unpack topics like the cloud, security, supply chains, and of course, the developer experience. Welcome, Tom. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today. Really looking forward to this conversation. You and I have known each other for a long time. Be great if you could maybe give us a little bit of background on I guess on how you met me. I mean, that might be the best place to start is day one in NYSE.
Yeah, a long time ago at this point. I think you're right. It's somewhere in the region of 15 plus years anyway, 16 years, a long time anyway. But no, our first meeting, it would have been, I'd originally gotten a job in NYSE. I was coaxed into the company by Lee Skillen, who tried to encourage me to join and promised that it was great. And for the most part, it was. I started the company, and in the company, I'd always wanted to be a developer. I always wanted to work in software engineering. I first met you, Alan, as the development manager for the new feed handler team. It's a very long-winded way of saying that we built new stuff and turfed it over the wall to other people. And yeah, it's we've known each other ever since.
Yeah. Do you know, it occurs to me, I actually don't know how you met Lee the first time.
Yeah, Lee and I have a bit of history outside of, well, all of this stuff really. Sort of through mutual friends. We met actually whilst Lee was sort of at university, many years ago at this point. But we discovered that we both had a love of technology and engineering and all this kind of stuff. So I met Lee at the home of our mutual friend, where I used to live for a period of time. And Lee was coming over and showing his new phone off to this friend who didn't really mind too much about it, didn't really care. But I was sat there and I was super interested, and we sort of hit it off immediately, and yeah, the rest is history, as it were.
I remember the day that you came into the office with two versions of, you might have to tell me what they were, but you had a silver one and a black one.
Yes, that's correct. This was the Google Nexus 6P, for all the nerds out there that are currently nodding their head in agreement at the awesomeness of those devices. Yeah, the thing I remember mostly about that story, Alan, is probably more so that you dropped it almost immediately after I showed you it, which was very concerning since I was planning on returning one of them. And the one you dropped was the one I wanted to send back. And instead, I had to do it the other way around. So thanks for that.
Did you? I actually didn't know the end to that anecdote. So you actually had to send the one back that I dropped?
I sent the
other way around.
The other way around. I had to send the one back that I wanted to keep, that was pristine, and I had to keep the one that had a gouge up the side of it. So
sorry about that, man.
That's all right. These things happen. It's a funny story, if nothing else, at this point, right?
Yeah. So, and then you exited out of that business for a while, and you headed to Nueda. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Nueda and how you got on there.
Yeah, sure. So in Nueda, it was, for those unaware, Nueda at the time in Belfast was a sort of consultant company that dealt with a bunch of different industries and whatnot. So primarily public sector and capital markets. So more or less what we had done previously in the New York Stock Exchange. I worked there for about 3.5 years. In the capital markets department. So working primarily on projects for investment banks, tier one, tier two investment banks, building out financial products, all that kind of cool stuff, for commodities brokers, all this kind of stuff. So it was an interesting role. There was a lot of variety to it. It's it's an interesting thing, right? Because you're always keen to draw parallels to, I guess, the difference of a product company and a consultant company, and they are
Mm-hmm.
very different. Um, for what it's worth, I'd be product all day long. I think it's a huge boon to be working on something and seeing it, sort of develop and flesh out for the whole life of the product and see what it does afterwards as well. In consulting, you generally get a little bit of that at the beginning normally, but after a little while, you kind of have to step back and step away and sort of do the whole process all over again. So there were sort of pros and cons, but it was a good place to work. I really enjoyed it.
Mm. I can't believe you were there for 3.5 years. Um,
Yeah,
that was definitely the wilderness period, but for Lee
it
and I
was.
think when we were trying to figure out what we were doing and trying to, go through early ideation, figure out everything, and then go out and try and, raise some money. So we raised our seed round in 2019, and uh, obviously that was successful. And the first thing we were, we need to hire Tom and we need to hire Dan. So those were you guys were top of our list in terms of trying to bring back into the company. And we were so pleased that both of you, accepted. Uh, what was it like kind of, coming back into, well, back working with Lee and I, but coming back to something that you had sort of seen the early signs of before you had gone to Nieta, and then kind of coming back and seeing what it was like then?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome would probably be something that a lot of folks would resonate with, but it it, it felt it felt the same but markedly different, if that makes sense. When I had originally sort of moved on to New Ada, um, we'd sort of just had the beginnings of what would be the Cloudsmith product. So there were some of the underpinnings there, some of the package formats, for example, had been fleshed out prior to me leaving. But coming back, the difference, I mean, what Lee and you wrote in that period of time is just it's incredible, and sort of seeing the change in how the product itself had actually formed. You look at things like the billing system, permission system, things like that did not exist before I moved on. And to see all of that sort of come to life in a product that works, there were actually customers that were using it and were happy with it. And yeah, it was great. Like it was really cool to see. But be honest, yeah, I was a little bit sort of bewildered. I think having been out of it for a little while, felt I understood it a little bit, but equally felt completely out of my depth initially. But at the same time, quite glad to be there. It was great to work with folks again, and it was nice to have Dan along for the ride as well. He was suffering alongside me whilst we got back up to speed.
Yeah. No, it's like, there was a lot of work done in kind of in that period, um and maybe the biggest part was not just the technology, but actually like we had some semblance of go to market by the time you had kind of come back, and we had a sort of steady stream of customers kind of coming in, and that kind of made all the difference in terms of kind of the roadmap and those early decisions of like what to do and how to, and how to do it. So um and then that was early that was early
It's late
20.
2019, 2020 almost, I think.
Yeah. So um and then we were in the Malone Road, the 33 Malone Road office at that point, and we had hired Kyle and Andrew Spade. Paddy was obviously there, and Dan. and you and Lee and me and Peter and Kimmy upstairs, I
Kimmy
think.
upstairs,
Yeah.
yeah, as well.
So
That's right.
yeah, no, that was kind of an amazing time of that was a big difference for Lee and I, was like, getting more engineers in the door to do more things, So
Yeah.
I think in those days we tried to get people to write a package format. You may have been exempt from that at the beginning. I don't know. Do you remember?
Uh, I was somewhat exempt. Lee assured me that I'd written Debian in the past, and I couldn't remember any of it. But he's a smart guy, so he's probably right. But yeah, I'd written Debian in the past and worked in, I think, maybe one or two other things. And that I most of my focus in the early days was augmenting what was there. So with Debian, for example, what with the fact that I was so familiar with it, according to Lee, I would be able to quickly bolster it and add support for a bunch of stuff that folks were very interested in, like multi-distribution type stuff and everything. So I generally focused on that side of things before starting to look at some of the bigger picture stuff afterwards, rather than the formats themselves.
Yeah. And then COVID happened, and we all went home, and made the the one and final transition to remote working. And I suppose maybe it's, you have moved up the ladder now to principal engineer. You've moved into office of the CTO. You've seen that journey from, I think you were employee number 5. So you've seen the journey from employee number 5 to nearly 90 people in the company, which I'm still bewildered by in many ways. It's kind of crazy to see just the sheer growth and the sheer sort of focused roles that have kind of appeared. I mean, any I'd love to hear how you think that transition has gone over the years, I suppose particularly in terms of kind of engineering, and then ultimately to where you've ended up now.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's been it's been a journey for all of us. It's been a very, very long, fulfilling and rewarding but difficult journey at times. In the early days of excuse me, the early days of what we were working on, I think the market we were working with was maybe just a little bit less, not necessarily less complex, but we understood it very well, and what we were sort of trying to target meant that we were focused on just slightly different things. Like, we wanted to build the best in class package management, artifact management platform, and over time, um, very, very quickly it became clear that as an industry we were moving towards bigger and better things, particularly in the security space. And I think for me, that's probably been in the engineering side of things, that's probably been the driver for how our engineering teams itself have actually started to evolve and split into different functions and roles. But the journey has been, it's been difficult. We had periods of time where we might have had 3, 4 engineers trying to originally sort of keep the lights on of the product, which was it's difficult, but surprisingly doable when it needs to happen. Um, and we had 3 or 4 engineers at one point. Balancing sort of on-call rotas and things like that in the early days was obviously more tenuous, in that you would typically be on call significantly more, just due to the virtue of there being fewer people to share the load. As time has went on and we started to flesh that out, I think it's certainly become a much more nicer experience for folks to be on call. But the actual growth of the engineering teams and things, it's been like, we've seen some points where we might have had maybe 10 or 15 engineers, then that dropped down and then it went back up again. And but it sort of, it feels as though we're kind of in a good trajectory at the moment, primarily because we're focused on delivering product in, I guess, just sort of focusing on individual product areas across teams and giving them the opportunities to sort of build up and understand awareness of the microcosm of what it is that they're working on in the product. early days, we didn't really, like, the product probably was less complex than it is today, but we also did have fewer engineers, and it made it even more difficult to try and sort of balance development of the product and try and get it built and get more stuff done out there to move the needle, whilst also ensuring that it was stable and that the product itself was able to actually meet the needs of and expectations of the customers that we already had, let alone the ones that we were chasing. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I think I think last saw we were around about 30 in engineering today, which is kind of terrifying to imagine that we have that many people. Just in engineering alone, it's like you said, we're at 90 now or something across the company, and it's just bewildering to think that that's actually the case, and there's folks that that we still need, I still need to talk to and get to know on a more sort of personal basis, etc. So the growth has just been insane, and but at the same time, super, super exciting, and as of late, I would say relatively, sort of sustainable. It's in keeping with the demands that are being placed on each department.
So you mentioned complexity there, Tom. I mean, how has that grown with scale, or has that grown with functionality, or a bit of both?
Yes, both for sure, and different challenges for each. I think for scale, we're heading to give some context. We're looking at, we always wanted to build the product to be able to accommodate 10x. It's always the golden marker, right? 10x the capacity, etc., from where we are today. But some of the difficulties in that sort of started to arise, in that our growth was such that 10x was too slow. It turned out then we needed to be at 100x or even greater. And so there's challenges in that, in meeting the needs of customers, the amount of requests and artifact serving, etc., that's being done. So that's one aspect of it, and trying to ensure that the service is stable throughout that. It doesn't go down. It has to be reliable and available for our customers to use at all times. But that's just the technical side, and generally everyone going through building a product will face a point where they had scale problems or scale concerns. Probably a better way of looking at it, but scale's just one thing. Aside from the scale element, it is complexity. We've since sort of bolstered the product significantly. I think we'd originally had maybe around about, I'm trying to imagine, in 2019 when I'd started, but I think there was maybe around about 10 package formats. There's probably more than that. But in terms of what we offered for each of those formats, it was widely different from what we do today. So it was relatively, light touch, just about pulled out enough metadata to be able to understand what the artifact was and then serve it to customers afterwards. Today, of course, that has jumped. We're now at about 28 package formats. And the complexity of those, of what we would call format completedness, is significantly higher now than what it used to be. We have features now such as signatures and verification stuff that we did have previously, but we're certainly more immature. Upstream support, for example, that's a de facto standard that we have now across our package formats. And that in itself, it depends on the format, but some of those can be incredibly complex, depending primarily on the native interface, like how package managers actually speak these formats individually, and some of them can be very, very difficult. But many of those problems were hit as we started to onboard customers with even more sort of ingrained approaches to building software that, previously you might have gotten away with saying, oh, well, this is just how it is. This is how it works here. Can you change your pipelines? We can't do that anymore. And we kind of have to be at a point where there's decisions that be made about what actually goes into the product, like what new stuff are we bringing to the table, and how are we sort of meeting the needs of the customers that we have. So that's on the software side of things. On the business side of things, it's been probably difficult in the sense that we've had lots of probably very similar problems in growth, excuse me, as many organizations do, in that when you start to onboard more engineers, certainly in the early stages, it doesn't necessarily improve productivity. There is an overhead to adding an engineer to the mix. There is an overhead to adding a new engineering manager to the mix. And it takes time for folks to kind of start to not only just to find their feet, as it were, but also to be able to thrive in that environment. I think primarily because the product has started to become that much more complex. The supply chain security stuff is all very much tantamount now to the product. We need very hyper-focused teams to work on that stuff. Whereas historically we had like a scattergun approach of going, okay, today I'm going to work on the upstreams for Debian, or Patty, you might go and work on the CDN or something to support some. We kind of have to be certainly a lot more judicious about our resources today. And I think there's been a learning experience to understand kind of where we've gotten to, what has worked, what has not worked. And, we're ultimately all just, we're still learning every day and trying to apply the learnings to make it easier. But it is complex. Certainly adding more people to the mix makes things significantly more complex. I would argue probably more complex than the technical challenges that we've had to date.
No, I mean, I have to admit, I liked it when there was like 3 or 4 people, and it was the communication was so much easier as well. And I guess that was obviously partly because we were all sitting around at this sort of the same desk in the same room too. So like I really did enjoy those early days of just sort of solving the problems in the room, right in front of people. And now you have to get, multiple people involved, and it definitely does. It definitely does have an effect. I mean, arguably we're making better decisions now. I mean, or maybe inarguably we're making better decisions now, that are more measured and, and better to chart the course for the roadmap and the overall platform. But I have to admit, I do miss the days of the chaos and the fixing of the problems sort of there and there in the room.
Yeah, there's something, there was certainly something cool or nice about being in the heat of it and just getting stuff done ultimately, and seeing, certainly back then, when we worked on something, it was fast. Like it was, obviously the whole phrase people say is, move fast and break things. We certainly did move fast in the early days. Tried not to break too much, but these if you can aspire. But yeah, there was a certain kind of camaraderie, I think, about being in that situation and being where we were at the time. It was exciting. It was, it was very, very fun. It was just great to kind of be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was less customers too, so the customer demand for things was less, so you actually could kind of divert attention immediately to a customer and kind of try and help them solve their problem. And we still do a really good job of that, I think, even at the scale that we're at today. And and like I think that kind of comes from that DNA that we kind of laid down sort of in those early days. But yeah, no, I mean, it's, there's challenges all over the business to try and, sort of raise our game. And I think we're doing a pretty good job to that. So I suppose that moves us on nicely to, you're, like I said before, you're now a principal engineer. You're in the offices. You've moved into the office of the CTO, sort of out of kind of the regular engineering squads. And that gives you a bit more, freedom and free license to kind of go off and work on what we kind of internally call Horizon 2 projects. How has that transition been for you?
It's a good question. It's been there's challenges and there's certainly pros to it. One of the nice things about being in the position that I and a few others are in at the moment is just that predominantly there's certainly an element of trust to get stuff done and know that know that you're working towards something sort of much larger than where we are today. And it's exciting. It's exciting. There's an element of sort of feeling back and like where it was in those early days of, sort of where it's not necessarily that we didn't have product market fit at certain things, but it was just, we were just doing things incredibly fast. We're trying to get stuff out and we were trying to do the right thing. The Horizon 2 stuff that we're working on currently it's a similar approach. They're bets, they're things that we might not have ordinarily done or tackled throughout the regular kind of engineering cadence because, there are so many other concerns in terms of keeping the lights on, in terms of meeting customers' roadmap requirements and all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to have the opportunity to take a step back and actually go, okay, give us 2+ years, where do we want to see this product? What do we want to see in the product that we're currently not able to do? And it's nice that we're taking that approach to do it. I think from a personal perspective, like it's interesting because moving away from kind of task oriented, like, building something for a little bit, fixing an issue, working with some other folks in the squads, etc., to get stuff over. There's an element of that you do sort of lose, I think, and it becomes more difficult to kind of, I guess you do certainly to keep yourself very motivated. It's a research oriented like way of doing things, so primarily a lot of document making, a lot of understanding about what can be done, what can't be done, and ultimately trying to distill that down into something that you can be presented to other folks to help inform whether or not we move forward on things. So yeah, it's pros and cons, I think. Certainly missing the opportunity to work in some of the squads. We do still get that in Horizon 2 during what we would call the kind of integration or incubation phase. So stuff that we do build, we do go back and work with squads to kind of get that over the line. But the period at which that can happen could be, it could be a month, it could be 3 months, depends on the project that we're looking at currently.
Yeah. And you're just out of a squad recently?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I worked.
What was that about?
Yeah, so it's a good question as well. I worked internally what we would call Sentinel. It's a squad that's primarily focused around supply chain security, and the features of the platform that meet that broad strokes goal or remit. What I was focused on at that time was the incubation of a product, or rather a feature improvement that we had in the platform called continuous security. And continuous security, excuse me, was kind of like it was an evolution to the concept of security scans. We've supported security scans for quite some time, but scans are heavy. They require action to occur. They require things to happen in order to understand, what has changed. And a whole bunch of the times we took a step back and looked at this and thought, well, hang on, if we understand what something is, what a product is, could we not flip that on its head and instead have it where when, CVEs or vulnerabilities are actually announced, we do the inverse. We check at that point to see, should we apply this to any other artifacts inside of the platform. And, the benefit of us having a kind of SaaS platform like this that's tailored for this sort of stuff is it certainly enables that kind of stuff to be done at scale. And it's been very helpful. Like, we've taken off a whole bunch of time in terms of security scans. We've enabled recurring security scans because of the efficiencies that have been gained in using the new process. And we've ultimately offered the ability to get enriched data to customers using enterprise policy management. There's now the ability to fetch EPSS scores, for example, that can be used to write better policies. So it's been a very good project, and I think so far things seem to be good with it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. No, I mean, I love it when we figure out something innovative that finds performance or finds another way of surfacing more data into the platform, because I think that kind of really resonates with the reason why we started the company in the first place, was to kind of give suppose that language maybe wasn't there at that particular time, but really sort of, control and visibility of their software supply chain. Oh no, I've been in the industry now for over 25 years, which
Yeah. Frightening,
scare
isn't it?
it is frightening. I
Yeah.
think that's that. Like I felt young when we started, so like that was when we were. I think I was like 33 or something when we kind of left Nizy and sort of started
Yeah.
this whole journey. And at that point, like you weren't old enough to be the father of people that you hire. And now it's like you know easily. It's kind of shocking.
Yeah. I know. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy just to think back how long it's, and it's, I mean, Cloudsmith itself and the incarnation it's been in has been going, like a long burn, but less so today. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of, it's all very kind of,
it took a
like,
long time to build the rocket ship,
took a
and
long time to build the rocket ship. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's the words I'm looking for.
yeah.
But back then, like it was, it was tough going, and you just felt for like a lot of times you kind of just felt like you were getting a kicking, you know,
Figuratively,
figuratively. I
not
wasn't, no, for anyone watching this, like I didn't actually get a kicking from Lee or Alan, but I mean more like a kind of personal mental kicking.
yeah. It was passion and grit, like that was the fuel in those early days. And I mean, I had very high standards at that point. I've since been on a kind of mellowing journey where my expectations, have like expectations a bad word, and and could and should, like those types of words are all a bad place to exist when you're trying to sort of track and create and think about things and everything. It's more now. It's like we haven't done that yet. I was very quick to add yet onto the end of sentences. And I think that, it's, it has absolutely been part, a massive journey, but at the same time, when you think about it in the moment, it's like, what can you do in the moment to make, sort of the best decisions and kind of go forward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of that kind of leads into like how has it been for you kind of personally in terms of the whole development experience sort of through that process? Like at the very beginning, we would have kind of handed you the laptop on day one and was like sort of, there's your desk, away you go. Um, and and now we have people coming in and like there's a whole host of resources and things to, a plan when they come in the door. So, like, how has it been for you, sort of seeing that change over the years?
It's it's interesting because it's like you said, it was, I don't want to say it was chaotic. It wasn't. It goes back to the way things, what we've just talked about it sort of being exciting. And, I think as well, because it was probably slightly different because we all knew each other so well. Like we'd all worked with each other for quite some time. And there's an element of knowing, what, how someone will react by you doing or not doing something. And, over time, obviously, the more folks you get in through the door, the less that actually exists as a thing. But it's been crazy. I think just looking at what a developer sort of gets now as they come through the door, like as you say, there's a huge plan. Um, you think we have a sort of buddy system as well. We have a whole bunch of things, but like, I mean, we didn't get any of
Hmm.
that back in the day.
No. You don't.
But
I mean, you don't still use Vim anymore, right? Like,
oh gosh, no, no, no,
oh,
no. It's
right.
like, yeah, those days are over. Although I mean, you remember this? I used to use a whole, like I was always using some kind of funky editor or something
Mm-hmm.
and trying to persuade you and Lee to use it.
Yeah.
If in
And I
2012,
never switched. I
you
never
never
switched.
switched. You never
I
switched.
was Vim until I stopped basically picking up the keyboard to code.
You're well, I mean, it's a bit like coffee for you, black Americano is about as as exciting as you're prepared to go. Um, but the editor stuff is interesting. Like I obviously you can still use Vim, but it's sort of changed widely by having Visual Studio Code has probably been the kicker. But even before that, it was Atom, GitHub Atom, or it was Sublime Text before that. There's always been some pretty neat stuff out there. Like trying to convince some of you guys to actually look at it is a different matter. But by and large, I think developers today they're certainly more judicious about what they want to use and what they want to play with. And the editors are kind of crazy, particularly the AI side of things and stuff at the moment. It's kind of frightening where we are with all that.
And you would know better than me because you're a bit closer to it. Like, do the teams aren't dictated in terms of like what tooling at that level to use, are they?
No.
So you can kind of use whatever you want, but
yeah, in the early days we used to allow folks to use whatever computer that they wanted. Like you would have gotten a budget of some sort that was pretty generous from what I remember. It's been a while now, but the idea was you could pick, obviously developers, they all pick MacBooks, right? That's just the way it is. So eventually we ended up just sort of making that the default, primarily because it makes tooling things and building a developer experience for folks consistent. It just makes it a bit easier. But in terms of the tools that they use day to day, no, there's no real kind of like, if someone wants to use Vim all day, they still can. We'll not stop them. It's just we'll generally try and
maybe from a productivity point of view, but yeah.
Yeah. From that, yeah. But it's interesting. Like we just it really is just using the right tool for the job, I guess. That there's so many of them now. It's completely changed. In the space of even maybe the last 5 years. Like I haven't personally used these very much, but I know folks have used, Cursor and things like that. It's if nothing else, it's just kind of exciting and crazy that these things exist now. Like developers have so much choice whenever it comes to deciding what tools to use in their toolbox.
Yeah. So and team wise as well, right? That's the other side of this, in that we now have a platform team, we now have SREs. There's a lot of sort of the rough edges that we would have had to have dealt with as developers, sort of, managing the platform itself has kind of been taken away from sort of the day to day, and that there's a whole, there's a team to kind of look into those things. That must have made life a bit easier.
It's made a massive difference just having a platform team. I think we always kind of had a platform team in the sense that Paddy was the platform team for quite some time. It's just by de facto, it's something that he's always been interested in. He loves a good incident. It's kind of been nice having folks around there that are super interested in that stuff. But just taking away the notion of having to be a complete Postgres expert. About shaping queries to the health, etc., about understanding the way down into the performance characteristics of certain things. Those things still matter, they're still important. Like in general, when we ship stuff, we've tried to, like, the folks in platform have improved developer experience probably from that by quite some bit. They've added things like internal profiling, for example, using OpenTelemetry. Things like that historically we just didn't. We have in production, and we have in other production-like environments, but certainly not within our development environments. And sometimes there was a big sort of gap, I think, between, or potentially a big sort of gap between what you see in development and in production. We try to keep the environments roughly the same, but there's some disparities between the two. But the platform teams kind of just made that a whole lot simpler. We don't need to think about that stuff. I think for me, one of the big things has been having, dedicated data functionality, like having folks that exclusively look at databases and schemas and all that sort of stuff, because certainly from my experience, that's not something I've ever particularly enjoyed. It's something that the data folks seem to absolutely love. So I call that a win-win. But just just having that in place, it's really great to have folks that can kind of, do the right thing, and they know their focus area inside and out, and you can learn off them. You can find this stuff out, but it does mean that we get more opportunity to focus on what we're actually trying to ship as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, that it has made a huge difference, I think, across sort of, all the teams. So looking ahead, um, what are you looking forward to most, in the next 6 to 12 months?
More than likely, the scale challenges that we're hitting, particularly with our sort of most recent very large customer who's come on board, and the challenges that presents us, just as a whole company, really. We have to level up. There's just no two ways about it. We've got really good folks across the board, not just within engineering, but great folks in customer success, etc., that are able to work and build really good relationships with customers, and it's super, super important. Like we leverage those relationships all the time just to understand. I mean, obviously the product folks do that to understand what we need to build next, but even in engineering, it's nice to join calls, for example, with customers and just speak to them. It's one of the great things about what it is that we do day to day is, the people, our customers are just people like us, and that's not necessarily normal in most industries, but it's something I sort of appreciate. But if I was to talk about the excitement, it probably comes off as the scale challenges, and a lot of people would probably be like, well, what's exciting about that? I think it's the leveling up side of things that we have to do across the board. It's the improvements to the platform that we need to make in order to meet those new challenges. We'll be introducing massive changes, for example, to how we do work at the edge, right? And I'm a nerd. That's super interesting, and it's great. And trying to see what that's going to look like in reality is just exciting. It's just, there's a whole bunch of things that we've wanted to do for such a long period of time that we just, we maybe, it wasn't the right time for it, or there were other things that we were kind of contested with. So yeah, it's probably the scale stuff. It's understanding, what we're going to get out of that. Particularly, I think, with the supply chain security stuff. Like, we're in the process of rolling out policy management, etc. But there's a lot of work that looks really, really pretty cool that we're sort of looking at it at the moment related to it in terms of what happens next with policy management. And I think for me, it's super exciting just to imagine that, you'll be able to drag and drop things and make policies and do all that kind of cool stuff. Like, it's just a world apart from what we, were doing 5 years ago even.
Yeah. Yeah. So final question for you. What do you love most about your job?
There's two things I would say to that. I think the first one would be probably the industry. Sounds weird, right? But it's changing all the time. Like, it's never dull. It's never staying the same. I think, we're the last 4 years, I've discussed this a couple of times now, but with the hyper focus on the importance of security and all that sort of stuff, it's driven us to have completely new solutions to problems that didn't exist to the same degree a while ago. Over the last sort of 3-4 years, we've seen the prevalence of things like S-bombs. We've seen thinking more about attestations, using frameworks like Toto and all that kind of stuff. It's super cool to see how those are going to start to be used more in the public domain. Like, these things are starting to be introduced into package managers, and they're starting to be used heavily by everyone. Even canonical registries today are focusing on security. So it's interesting because that gives us a lot to work with. It gives us a lot to work towards. But so the industry is probably it, just because it's so fresh. It's always changing. There's incredibly talented and smart people that work across lots of different organizations that we have partnered with and organizations that we have yet to partner with. It's just great to see these folks and see them sort of trying to change things and make it better. And like I said, it's making things better for other folks like us, really. Like, DevTools is interesting in that respect. And it's just different from any other industry that I've ever worked in. aside from that, and this is a bit of a cop-out, I guess, but, just talking about the people, it is literally the people working in Cloudsmith. I've the benefit of being here for, 5.5 years at this point, and I've had the opportunity to meet a ton of people across the board. And there's, some of the people that we're bringing in are just, I still learn stuff off every one of them, regularly. And that's rare, to work somewhere and still get that, so long into your role. And they're just nice folks. They're just great to work with. They all kind of, they just want to do things and do it right. They have a right attitude, right way of looking at things, and they like dogs and stuff. So that works for me too,
Yeah, no, the offsites are really fun, and getting everybody into your room. I was having dinner with Glenn, the CEO, a couple of nights ago, and we were talking about the offsites, and he was saying, we're a Belfast company. The offsites are probably always going to be in Northern Ireland. And I was like, on one hand, I was like really pleased, because that means like we don't have to travel too far to go to the offsites and get to go home to your own bed. And then on the other part, I was like, but it would be nice to go somewhere sunny, So
could Vegas, come on, can we not get to Vegas or something?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, I've been angling to get us to go to even AWS reInvent for a number of years, and I swear it's because reInvent looks really good. It's nothing to do with Vegas. Scout's honor.
We might be able to get you to reInvent, but I don't think we're going to land the whole team into Vegas anytime soon. Maybe it's Series C.
Maybe we can dream. You gotta have dreams and goals, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, look, Tom, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And, there's lots of cool things to come for both you and the company. So I'm really excited to see what's next. So thank you very much.
Yep, likewise, Alan. Thanks very much. It's been great.